We can go at 6 o'clock in the morning also. It's okay. We can finish it off. இதும் இருக்காது, time இருக்காது. We can go. ஆனா அவன் மட்டும். மார்னிங்ல
Dr. Raghavan,
yes,
please, yeah, start.
Good evening. Welcome to the day 3 of the second edition of the SICKI webinar, which is supported by the Sri City and the knowledge partner is Mitra. We have a very interesting session today. May I now request Mr. Ganapati, the President SICKI, to deliver the formal welcome address. Mr. Ganapati, please.
Thank you, Doctor. And it's a high privilege and honor for SICKI to have Mr. Ram Kumar, the CMD of Cognizant India, to share some thoughts on the IT sector, or how it would look post COVID-19 as the world comes out of COVID-19. We also know Mr. Ram Kumar as the President of the Madras Chamber of Commerce, one of the most active chambers in the country today. And as somebody who heads the chamber, it adds to our joy to have him share his thoughts on with SICKI and its guests this evening. Earlier in the day, I was talking to our host, our anchor, Mr. T.S. Sudhir, and having some exposure to that sector myself, I was telling him how things could transform itself, and he took me on a statement I made in a television to a television audience a few weeks ago, almost a week into the COVID, that this could well turn out to be a Y2K moment for the IT industry, based on my conversation with our executive committee member Mohan Narayanan, saying that this could open up big time opportunities for Indian IT industry in the health and life sciences sector, apart from everything else. We were talking about how, in fact, I told Sudhir that the world will consist of two sets of people. People who know IT and IT people. The IT people meaning ignorant of technology. These are the new IT guys who will necessarily have to come to understanding what IT is in a new post-COVID-19 world. In fact, I was telling him that how the entire shopping experience in the world could change, how contactless shopping will become the order of the day. You may actually walk into a store, order everything without touching, without ever meeting a human being. And these are things that where IT will come into play big time and transform everything across what we are familiar with. The post-COVID-19 will be tremendously IT supported, IT enabled, and perhaps IT dependent. It is in this atmosphere that I thought Mohan should share a few thoughts himself to set the context for today's discussion. Mohan has been a great friend of Ram Kumar. I've been a great admirer of Ram Kumar. And for both of us, it's a great privilege and honor to invite Ram Kumar. And to set the context for the day, it's my privilege to invite one of our own committee members, Mohan Narayanan. Mohan.
Your mic is not on.
Mohan, unmute. Aishwarya, unmute him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Able to
sir.
hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
now
sir.
we can.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Sorry for the delay. So I just want to take off from where Ganpati left. Now, what COVID has brought to the table is, a lot of jargons. Right from parents to husbands to wives to children, a lot of jargons being used all over the place. And I guess part of the reason is everybody is locked up at home and they're trying to make their lives interesting. Now, one interesting jargon I saw on the television a day ago is about the industry, of course, post-COVID. As of course, we will have to wait as to when that happens. But three words I heard, the industry survive, recover, and grow. These are the three words that I heard. And experts are trying to put together in terms of countries, which countries will cross these three paths faster than the others. And there is a general view that the Western economies will survive, recover, and grow faster than maybe some of the emerging economies. Now, as far as India is concerned, there are numbers available in terms of GDP, negative GDP for this year. And, we are all waiting to figure out how it will span out in the years to come. So there are questions on, how many industries will survive, how many industries will recover, and in the end, how many will actually grow. Now, of course, as far as the IT sector is concerned, there is a near unanimity that this is one sector which will definitely survive, will definitely recover, and will definitely grow. But the question that I want to put on the table, and for experts like Ram and Sudhir to brainstorm as part of this panel, is will the IT sector grow enough and fast enough to take the rest of the country along with it? Because there is a certain amount of pessimism in terms of the pace at which the rest of the industry will grow, whether it is manufacturing, engineering, and of course much less said about hospitality, travel, tourism, etc. So that being the case, I think IT has a huge responsibility now, not only for to make sure that it by itself recovers and grows, but to make sure that it carries India along with it, till the time the rest of the sectors actually grow. So to me, I hold a lot of responsibility on this sector, because this is one which always is the forefront when it comes to recovery. So for that, with that interesting thought for me at least, it is a great pleasure for me. Of course, this is not the time for me to talk. Great pleasure for me to introduce my good friend Ram Kumar. As Ganpati said, Ram Kumar is the chairman and managing director of Cognizant India, and he's also on the global leadership team of the Global Cognizant organization. As you all know, out of the 2.7 lakh staff they have, majority of them are actually in India. And Ram has the responsibility of running the organization here, both in terms of strategy, business development, execution, and operation. He has been in the company for a very, very long time now, almost pretty much from the beginning. And of course, prior to Cognizant, he worked, no prizes for guessing, he worked with TCS. And very interestingly, he was in the academia prior to TCS. Now, we all know Ram, of course, from the industry side. So as Ganpati said, he's the president of the Madras Chamber of Commerce. He's also in the National Executive Council of the American Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And he's also part of the Skill Building Council for NASSCOM, which is the IT industry body. Now, apart from these industry bodies, he has a terrific relationship with the academic institutions. He is a governor's nominee to the Dr. MGR Medical University Senate. He is also in the governing board of Triple.
We seem to have lost your audio, Mr. Mohan.
Sir, Mohan sir.
Mohan sir, I think we have lost your audio.
I don't think he's hearing us.
Okay. So, should I take over, Aishwarya?
Yes, I
Sorry.
think you can take over while Aishwarya call him on the phone and tell him.
Yeah, we apologize for that technical glitch with Mr. Mohan Narayanan's line there. We couldn't hear the last part of what he said. As Mr. Ganapathy said, we are all the IT crowd out here. There are some like Mr. Ramkumar, Mr. Ganapathy, Mr. Mohan, who are all the IT, the information technology crowd, and there are some like me who are the ignorant of technology kind of crowd. And Mr. Ganapathy is truly in Venkaiah Naidu mode today, and dare I say, he's following in the footsteps of the Prime Minister with this new coinage of IT as ignorant of technology. Mr. Ganapathy spoke about the Y2K. He made a comparison with what happened in 1999 and 2000. I would talk about and make a comparison with the news development, which I have covered in great detail, many cyclones. And when we generally go to cover a cyclone, we generally find that there are the whatever is established in the low-lying areas are the ones to get affected. And the ones which are away from the shore, they kind of are relatively safe, even though they may have some kind of damage. What I would really want to know from Mr. Ramkumar is whether the IT sector is in a low-lying area or is it really away from the shore, quite unaffected by what has happened as a result of the COVID pandemic. We know that sectors such as the aviation, real estate, tourism, media, entertainment are all in the low-lying areas, and they have really borne the brunt as far as the COVID pandemic is concerned. Mr. Ramkumar, over the next 10 to 12 minutes, would give his opening remarks on where he thinks the world will go as far as the world of IT is concerned. I wouldn't say in a post-COVID era, because now we have to learn to live with the corona pandemic and learn to operate within this corona pandemic. So what does he see is the future in the next year or two, and also a long-term perspective? Mr. Ramkumar, over to you, and after that the floor will be open for you to send in your questions, which Mr. Ramkumar will be more than happy to answer. Mr. Ramkumar.
Yeah, thanks, Sudhir. Thanks, Mohan, Ganapathy, for that introduction and setting the context. And thanks to SICKI for this opportunity. As many of you know, COVID-19 has been an unprecedented pandemic. I don't think any of us had a playbook to manage this crisis. And to go back to the analogy that Sudhir used a few minutes back, fine, many of us have seen many floods, including the Chennai floods, the Kerala floods, and more recently, Cyclone Amphan, given that Cognizant has a large presence in Calcutta with approximately 19,000 employees. I can tell you that many of us have had some experience managing some of these calamities. But what we witnessed in the context of COVID-19 is something bizarre, almost bordering on surreal. And organizations like ours in the IT context, we have well-established crisis management teams, business continuity plans, and we prepare scenarios on how to respond to each of those scenarios reasonably well. And we do have tabletop exercises every single quarter to see how best we can manage such an eventuality. But we've never been to this movie before, if you will, in some sense. And by the way the IT industry managed through this, I should probably say is nothing short of magical. To get close to about 4 million people to transition to a work from home kind of a situation, all within 4 weeks. I would argue that this is the largest work from home transition ever, anywhere in the world. And I think it's time for us to also step back a bit and see how this was enabled and how many players actually came in to play this game. Then I would address your part of the question, Sudhir. I think in many of these sessions, sometimes I have seen it's fashionable to say that government should have done this, government should have done that, perhaps more could have been done, so on and so forth. And I would tell you that the government played a stellar role in ensuring that the IT industry was perhaps least impacted right through the process of COVID. Then the support that we got from our customers, from our employees and the larger society. Find the kind of help that we got from the state government, the police apparatus, the entire machinery. I think it's something that we haven't seen in our lifetimes. Let me just take 2 or 3 of those and then walk you through government. To start with, I would say that the Prime Minister actually set the tone at the top even before the lockdown. In fact, he came out and then tweeted a few days before the first lockdown, something along these lines. He said that India is extremely proud about the IT professionals who are working 24/7 to support the citizenry, and that this community of innovators and hardworking professionals are actually a solution to combating COVID-19. Because world over today, you look at any potential vaccine, all the ventilators that have been manufactured, all the diagnostic kits that have been 3D printed, technology has played a very, very important role in being a solution to addressing the needs of COVID-19. Immediately after the Prime Minister's tweet, the Ministry for Information Technology and Communications sent out a notification to all the state governments, to the chief secretaries, calling out IT as an essential service. As many of you know, in the Indian context, ESMA is usually associated with utilities, public healthcare, ambulance, and some of those services are not the IT services. The fact that the Ministry for Information Technology notified IT as an essential service, that actually enabled us to swiftly move work from our office to homes and continue to provide seamless service to our customers, both in the country as well as globally. Then several other departments of the government, whether it's the SEZ, STPI, Department of Telecommunications, they all pitched in, extended and relaxed certain operational conditions so that we are able to enable this work from home. Customers, given that a significant amount of work that we do is also for regulated industries, including healthcare, life sciences, defense, financial services, they gave permission for most of the companies to work from home with appropriate security protocols, given that security is extremely important. I would argue that India has been upgraded in the eyes of our global customers, the way we handle this crisis and the way we provided business continuity. As they say, leaders emerge from crisis. I would argue that India has truly emerged as one of the potential locations globally. We only reinforced our position of preeminence thanks to the way we handled the situation. Third is the way employees managed it. And as many of you know, in the Indian context, we don't have the concept of a home office. Fine. Even during a call like this, I was a little nervous because usually have about 5 to 6 kids at home, and they tend to move around and create a new backdrop every time I get into calls of this nature. And in the context of not having a focused home office, the way employees found a corner, ensured that they had the right bandwidth connection, or used dongles, UPSs, sat in makeshift chairs to continue to provide services to customers, I think that's truly remarkable. I think the employees in the IT industry have made a meaningful difference to what this industry could otherwise provide to our customers, and finally society. I think everybody out there played their role to create that meaningful difference in the marketplace. Now, one of the questions that was asked is, why is IT so important? And Mohan Narayan did allude to the fact that, hey, IT needs to grow at a galloping pace to make up for the loss of momentum in many of the other industries. I would argue that IT today cuts across every single industry, and no industry is complete without IT. The reason the government saw IT to be an essential service is we today support core banking operations. Across all the 4 editions of the lockdown, one industry that worked right through is the banking industry, the ATM machines to provide the much needed cash in the hands of people. IT is the entire backbone that supports banking operations, financial operations, stock exchanges, especially when more and more people transact digitally. Second, IT supports the entire healthcare continuum or the supply chain. The entire backbone for pharmaceutical companies, right from research and development to drug discovery to manufacturing to commercial operations, the entire supply chain today is stitched by IT. Third, supporting all these pharmaceutical companies in terms of even taking the drugs to the pharmacies, which were open 24/7 during the pandemic. Look at the number of Zoom calls that we would have had during the lockdown, supporting the telecommunication infrastructure. I would argue that the telecommunication companies have done a remarkable job. Fine in extending corporate grade telecommunication bandwidth to our houses so that all of us can conduct our activities as we would have conducted otherwise in a corporate environment. I didn't actually get to hear too many complaints of issues with latency, issues with connectivity, so on and so forth. And I think we should thank the telecommunication players, but IT has played a very important role in ensuring that that backbone was protected, and we enable them to do what they have done exceptionally well. And finally, the supply and distribution of all the essential food items through groceries and some of the shops that were open, the entire supply chain was managed by IT. So I would probably say it was overall a very humbling experience, what this industry has been through. And I don't think that this industry has ever been indebted to so many people at such a short period of time. And I think we need to extend our gratitude to everybody who actually supported us in this process. Now, coming to the core question that was asked on what is the role that IT can play in terms of driving growth in the economy, I strongly believe that this is a once in a century opportunity for India and for Indian IT to make it really big on the global stage. Not to say that we haven't done it earlier, but then the opportunity today is far greater than what we have seen ever before. I can touch upon it shortly. Second, given that the entire concept of work, what people today talk about as future of work, future of workplace, future of workforce is all going to get reshaped and reimagined, IT is clearly going to play a very, very important role in the months and years to come. Third, I strongly believe that COVID in some sense is going to perhaps bring India and Bharat closer. Today, we have demonstrated to the world that people from anywhere with any device can do any type of work, which means that the work that was traditionally done in the metros can potentially move to the hinterland, and we can bring about a thriving economic activity even in non-metros in the country. And that I believe is going to be a reality in the post-COVID situation. The only big challenge that we are going to probably have is, do we have the skills at scale to participate in this massive opportunity and turn this opportunity as much an obligation to the rest of the world. So with those few opening remarks, maybe I could throw it open for any questions, and then maybe address some of the other topics in the context of the questions that come my way.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramkumar. A lot of thoughts you have left us with, and I can already see a whole lot of questions coming in right away. People wanting to ask you questions, but I'll start with one of my questions and taking off from what I mentioned when I introduced you. We know that sectors like aviation, tourism, entertainment to a large extent have been affected very badly. You mentioned sectors like telecom, banking, etc., where IT has played a major role in ensuring that they were up and running even during this entire pandemic and lockdown period. Going forward, do you see the IT sector also kind of picking and choosing? For instance, aviation, tourism, etc., will take some time before they are up and running the way they were in the pre-COVID times. So are you likely to see more action in the health sector or say in the life sciences sector, the banking sector going forward?
Yeah, if you perhaps look at the different sectors in a graph, you would find tourism, aviation, entertainment, and certain elements of retail on one side of the spectrum,
Real
and
estate?
yeah, construction and real estate. And on the other side, you'd probably find telecommunication, financial services, insurance, healthcare, life sciences, biotech, medical devices, and certain parts of retail. Let me just pick retail because that's one industry that could potentially be on both sides of the spectrum. We have already seen many large global retailers file for Chapter 11 just in the last 3 weeks. These are primarily retailers who have been in the apparel industry, retailers who have been selling luxury goods, so on and so forth, which in some respects you may see as discretionary. But then by the same token, if you were to probably look at some of the large corporations, whether it's a brick and mortar in the context of Walmart or the online e-commerce in the context of Amazon, these are companies that are hiring in tens of thousands of people in the marketplace. So the large format retailers, groceries. In fact, I read a report that during the lockdown, that companies that manufactured and sold chocolates saw their sales go through the roof. Maybe because, fine, all of us had more access to our refrigerators and started consuming more chocolates than ever before. So I think we may have to peel the layers of the onion and look at which subsegments of industries are going to do well, which are the ones that may take some time to recover. But having said that, some of these industries that have been beaten down very badly, my own thesis is you will not see incremental innovation in those sectors. You would actually see exponential or explosive innovation in those sectors to bounce back. Right. So if I were to probably look at innovation in broadly 3 categories of incremental innovation, transformative innovation, and explosive innovation, in times such as these, industries that are getting pounded and badgered are the ones that will come back in a very different avatar that we would have never seen before. So I actually see this also as an opportunity for some of these sectors to completely reimagine their business models and make themselves even more relevant and sticky when it comes to the customer profiling. When it comes to the industry, as an industry, you realize that financial services, telecommunication, manufacturing, retail, energy, utilities, healthcare, life sciences. These would be industries that contribute to upwards of 75 to 80% of the Indian IT industry as a whole. So our exposure to the good parts of the industry has been quite high, and therefore I think based on the portfolio of companies, many of them will do reasonably well. There could be some who are exclusively exposed to the aviation sector or the entertainment sector. There the impact could perhaps be a little severe.
You showered a lot of praise on the software engineers, the people who work from home, adjusted very well to the new circumstances, and justifiably so. But if I may ask, what has been the big learning for you as a leader of many such teams? What are the new skill sets that perhaps the software engineer working in 2020 and beyond needs to learn in order to be efficient in a COVID and a post-COVID era?
I think while many folks tend to focus on the jobs of the future, I think the question that you asked is perhaps most relevant. People need to focus on the skills of the future, because for the same job, you actually need newer skills to survive, to grow, and to thrive. Just take a taxi driver in the last 5 years, the one who would have ferried you from the airport to home in a black cab. Fine, his capabilities today are very different from the capabilities of an Ola or an Uber driver. The Ola or an Uber driver is a little more tech savvy. He probably understands the GPS mechanics reasonably well. He knows when to call you, when not to call you, how to use WhatsApp, SMS, so on and so forth. So the World Economic Forum every year actually looks at the top 10 skills of the future. Let me just highlight a few of those. Many of these skills between 2015 and 2020 have remained the same, but there are certain newer nuances that have appeared in some of these skills. I'll give you a couple of examples just to drive home the point.
Yes, sir.
One, earlier people said you need critical problem solving skills. So if you look at the IT industry, every time we go to the campus, there are 3 or 4 capabilities that we look in students, irrespective of the discipline of study. One is numerical aptitude, logical reasoning, problem solving skills, and cultural adaptability, given that we work in a global context. So earlier, customers knew what the business problem was. They would hand the problem over to us and ask our employees to innovatively solve the business problem. So problem solving capability was very important then. But I would argue today, in this new era, where many of our customers do not even know what the problems are, they want us to collaborate with them and then find out what the problems are. So the new nuance with respect to problem solving is problem finding capability and then solving it. As one example. The second example, I think during introduction, Mohan Narayanan said that Cognizant has a little over 200,000 employees in India across 13 cities. And to manage such a population of high-performing individuals, we need a strong human resources canvas of professionals. And today, I would argue that we have in excess of 1,000 or 2,000 HR professionals in the company. So traditionally, these HR professionals only focused on human resources. But in the new normal, with robots, humanoids, cobots, and digital workers coming into the work area, fine, you actually need man-machine managers and not just human resources managers. So you would really need newer capabilities like a production manager or an operations manager with the human resources manager combined into one. Because even to know what work needs to be allocated to a machine and what work needs to be allocated to a human being, you need newer capabilities. So things like critical thinking, creativity, people and machine management, conflict management, some of these things are extremely important. And in the new COVID context, right, you alluded to the fact that I was praising a lot of our employees. Just look at employee connect and employee experience has undergone a tectonic shift, right? When you bring everybody to the campus, 20,000 people in a campus, sit in a cafeteria, have water cooler conversations, none of that is happening today. So how do you ensure that you have that connective tissues intact? Fine, in terms of providing the same level of employee experience when you have such a distributed workforce working from the living rooms and bedrooms of so many apartments in the country. So I think we need to devise very different capabilities to keep this connect on. I know collaboration tools are one. In fact, Zoom has breakout sessions. You can use those. But I can tell you, I have never seen the family members of many of my teammates. During the lockdown, I know everybody by their name. My daughter knows, she has made enough friends of the kids of my teammates. We have had virtual coffee sessions, virtual DJ, Zumba sessions. I think these are the skills that we need to cultivate to ensure that in a new, agile, distributed and fragmented world, we are still able to provide the same level of employee experience that we otherwise provided to people when they were in our offices.
Right. So the Cognizant family has really grown bigger, literally in that sense, right? Is work from home going to be the future work pattern? That's what Devesh Goa wants to know in the ITS industry. And if yes, then what happens to the large workplaces that many of the IT companies are working out, have taken on lease? How will those spaces be managed?
I think it's a little premature for us to call out how this is going to pan out over the next several years. I do know that some statements have been made by a few industry chieftains as to what proportion of the workforce will be in office and what proportion will work from home over the next several years. But one thing is very clear, that there is going to be a certain proportion of your workforce working from home.
Yes.
What would that be? In what calibrated fashion will you move from, let's say, 10% to 25% to 50% over a period of time? We need to wait and watch. This situation of COVID, if this were to continue for the next several quarters until we find a vaccine, please understand, every office, not just IT campuses, people will have to follow social distancing norms. So even if you have large campuses, you cannot accommodate 100% of its capacity.
Yes.
So that clearly means that you need larger campuses even to accommodate smaller teams.
Yes.
So that is going to continue for the foreseeable future as things play out.
Right.
But what this could also do is, I think COVID is going to accelerate the globalization of services. And tomorrow, people will very closely look at what tasks need to be done where, what tasks can be farmed out to which parts of the world, right down to its atomic processes, get the right profile of people at the right cost, and then seamlessly assemble it as a work product and deliver it to the customer.
Okay.
So this is going to have far-reaching ramifications, not just in the real estate context, but then do we really need all our offices in the metros? Take the Cognizant example. We have close to about 20,000 people in what is today called the tier 2 locations in the country, in Coimbatore, Kochi, Mangalore, Mysore, and some of these places. I can tell you, while roughly about 38-39% of our workforce in India is women, as we move to the tier 2 locations like Coimbatore, Mangalore, Mysore, it's either approaching 50% or has crossed 50%.
Fantastic.
Fine. About 2 weeks back, I had a call with Dr. Sridhar Mitta, many of you might know, who was a former chief technology officer of Wipro, and he ran a company called E4E. Today, he runs a company called NextWealth, which identifies very small villages and towns to incubate IT and allow it to blossom. So he has invested in locations like Salem and Chittoor, where he currently has close to about 1,000 people working out of these centers. So about 20-30 years back, as many of us know, people went to where software is developed. That's when we saw the migration to the US. In the last few years, we have seen software go to where people are. I get a feeling that COVID-19 will accelerate this even further. And that's the reason why I think Mohan Narayanan said it in his initial comments that during lockdown, we come up with new acronyms, new terminology, so on and so forth, right? The new term that I picked up during the lockdown is called remotopia. Remote working is a new utopia.
Okay.
Fine, and this could well become a reality in the next several weeks and months.
So you mentioned about remote working. Sanjay Bhandari is wondering what kind of a psychological impact could possibly have on your employees. Now, at least everyone was working from lockdown 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0. At least there was some kind of a possible exit date. If you are looking at working from home for the next 3 months, 6 months, what kind of a psychological impact could it have on employees without any, for instance, water cooler kind of conversations?
I think this is an area where we need to do a lot of research. As an industry, see, if you look at the Western markets where we have operations, a large population is already working from home, and they were working from home for years.
Yeah.
We only had small offices. Many of them did work from home in a very formal, structured, official fashion. And that is culturally acceptable in places like the US, in different parts of Europe, etc. I think culture and camaraderie play a very important role in the productivity of any organization.
That's right.
Fine. I would even argue that what differentiates organization A from organization B is a culture. Just as what differentiates a five-star hotel from another, which might probably be a dining experience, it might probably be a check-in experience, so on and so forth. So I think we cannot short culture and experience in the context of people-intensive businesses. I think the need is for us to empower our workers even more, to trust our workers even more. How do we bring about a sense of belongings? How do we clearly define goals and accommodate the needs and schedules of people when they work in a very different context and setting?
Yes.
And I think the trust economy, as it's called today, is going to play a very, very important role in the physical, mental, psychological, social well-being of every employee, if you will.
Right.
I would argue that is the reason why companies today are spending a lot of time in establishing helplines that people can call into in case they have any difficulty in adjusting to this new normal. I will tell you, I think companies need to get very creative about it. I can only give you a one-line Cognizant example. The minute we transition to this work from home model, we actually paid our employees up to the level of what we call associate in the company, 25% higher basic salary for the month of May.
Okay.
And this is not a small amount.
Yes.
Fine, it covered 130,000 people of our 200,000 employees in India. And this is upwards of 100 crores of rupees. Fine, about $20-25 million in terms of outgo, just to support them in this transition. So that they don't start thinking about, hey, look, should I pay for the bandwidth? Will the company reimburse? Should I invest in an ergonomical chair? Will the company reimburse? So on and so forth. Just for them to adjust to this reality, provide that material comfort, if you will.
Okay, that's great. That's great to learn. One sector, Mr. Ramkumar, which we did not mention when we talked about banking and telecom, which has kind of gained as a result of technology, has been education, with a lot of schools actually resorting to online education, with physical classes obviously not possible. Geeta Shankar has a very relevant question to ask. She says, I'm concerned about education in rural areas and the role of IT in enabling students to learn online because of lack of technology in the Bharat in India. What's your take on it?
I think we have a lot to do as a nation in bridging the gap or bridging the divide between what's happening in rural schools as well as the kind of technology infrastructure that is available in metros and urban areas. I can tell you, as an organization, we have worked very, very closely with the school education and the higher education departments of multiple states. I can give you the example of the school education department in Tamil Nadu, where we have had some experience. The government has made some significant investments in smart boards. Fine, so that the benefit of online education and interactive, immersive, gamified learning is also made available to rural students. But we still have a long way to go to ensure that this technology is made available to everybody. I can tell you, the school that my daughter goes to, they made a request about 2-3 days back saying, hey, we want to start classes online from 1st of June. There are many students who have enrolled in the school under the right to education quota. Many of them don't have a smartphone. If any of you have a spare laptop or a spare iPad or even a used desktop, can you make it available to these students? I think the one big benefit emanating out of COVID, the IT industry, at least the services side of the IT industry, has traditionally been extremely desktop dependent. And during the last 8 weeks, what all or many of the companies have done is, we have all ordered for tens of thousands of laptops, believing that laptops are the way forward. I believe that maybe a national body like NASSCOM, maybe perhaps has take this as a huge opportunity, and then say any company that wants to donate used desktops which may not find any further use, they take the ownership to collect all these desktops and make them available across the length and breadth of the country to all the rural and government schools where appropriate, so that that infrastructure can be made available at scale fairly quickly. And these are not small numbers that I'm talking about. These are hundreds of thousands of desktops, perhaps millions of desktops that can potentially be made available with appropriate governmental clearances, given that many of these might be bonded desktops, given that we operate within SECs and STPIs.
Yes. A lot many people, I can see a whole lot of questions relating to jobs. Of course, you mentioned about the fact that Cognizant gave a 25% above to about 130,000 employees to take care of the basic expenditure when they're working from home. But layoffs have been a disturbing trend across many sectors, whether it is media, in the field of entertainment, across sector. What is the situation in the IT sector? Anuradha Ramanujam wants to know that, Shreya Krishnan wants to know that. Basically, a lot of concern whether the IT sector also, especially the middle rung IT companies, will also see a lot of bloodshed.
I think that this is probably the finest opportunity for IT companies to grow and to make a meaningful impact. Let me give you some examples. Fine, about 300 years back, India and China collectively contributed to 60% of the world economic value. And India's contribution to that was roughly half of that 60%. In the last 300 years, we actually missed multiple opportunity waves, today called as Industry 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, driven by mechanization, industrialization, computerization, so on and so forth. With Industry 4.0, where the physical and the digital coalesce, I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for India to make it really big. I'll tell you why. India arguably has the largest pool of technology talent in the world with rich international exposure. And we also have exceptionally good talent across industries and domains that we focus on, given that there are so many joint ventures with global corporations in the Indian context. And if you look at some of the recent reports, between 2020 and 2030, India is going to unleash 92 million people of working age into the market. And just to juxtapose it, China is going to lose about 68 million people from working age during the same period. So you don't have a location in the world with this kind of a demographic benefit and the kind of technology prowess that we have demonstrated globally fine over the last several years. So the kind of opportunities that we are going to see at the intersection of technology and industry, I think we will only be limited by our imagination and creativity.
Okay.
Fine, while people can reel out the kind of jobs like cloud enablement of all traditional software and infrastructure, analytics and big data, cyber security, Fine. You look at so many of these opportunities are huge growth opportunities for the IT industry. But having said that, there are all kinds of opportunities in every industry segment. I think Mohan Narayan or Ganapati made a mention of the healthcare or the health tech opportunity in terms of life sciences, biotech, etc. Just look at in the last 30 days how many educational institutions have creatively 3D printed ventilators and robos. Shastra University out of Tanjore. Fine. Look at what Dr. MGR Medical University is doing in terms of finding a vaccine candidate using reverse vaccinology, so on and so forth. So I think this is a great opportunity. We just need to ensure that there are skills available at scale, but more importantly, companies invest.
Okay.
I think investment is the key to capitalize on the opportunities in the marketplace and not just keep focused on bottom line as a way out of this pandemic.
Okay. Lots of questions still to be asked, so we'll try to kind of accommodate as many as possible. One interesting question being asked is, given the fact that there has been this migration taking place, people from the big cities going back home, you mentioned a lot of tier 2 cities like Salem, Chittoor, you mentioned Tanjavur. Do you see, given the fact that work from home will be a reality for at least in the near future, do you see a lot of tier 2 cities actually now developing much more as far as the IT sector is concerned?
I think there are two sides to this. Let me just use the example of a conversation that I had with Jayesh Ranjan day before yesterday after this webinar session. Because Jayesh was talking about how the government is going to be a big spender on technology and how the Telangana government is focused on looking at tier 2 locations like Warangal, Khammam, Karimnagar, etc. Right? In the session that he had with you, Sudhir.
Yes.
So I was just exchanging some messages with Jayesh, telling him, hey, look, government can play a very important role in taking jobs to the hinterland. One suggestion that I provided to him was, hey, any government project that you give to any company, can you ensure that contractually that 20% of that work will be done out of a tier 2 location, any location that they can pick from the state? Likewise, at the national level, when the central government gives out all these contracts, can they identify the list of 50, 100 tier 2 locations in the country and tell any company that 20% of the work will have to be done from a tier 2 location of your choice? You pick and choose which one you're comfortable with. I think the industry has a role to play. The government has a role to play to take jobs to where people are. I think it is our responsibility in today's context, point number one. I'm not saying 100% of the job will have to be done there, but at least 20%. So that you don't start counter-arguing that hey, I don't find enough quality talent, it will impact on productivity, it will impact on the deliverables, so on and so forth. That's the first one. The second point is, I think a lot of the tier 2 locations have not been adequately exploited. Many of these are university towns across the country. I can tell you, Bhubaneswar, one location, all it takes is to have one anchor large player to demonstrate success. Once that happens, you know, everybody makes a beeline to that particular location. And we just need to identify those anchor customers.
Absolutely. And you did mention in one of your earlier answers about the percentage of women working in many of the tier 2 cities and locations, the cognizant locations. Isha here wants to know that if the work from home culture develops, do you see women's contribution in corporate structures increasing that much more, since they now may not have to worry about commuting and actually can focus much more and actually have a role much more prominently in the corporate structure hierarchy of the company?
Oh, absolutely. No two opinion about it. Not just women, but people from different walks of life who have not been mainstreamed into the corporate context. People with disabilities. Fine. For a variety of reasons, they are not able to participate in opportunities in the marketplace because they're not able to move out of their homes. Fine. So I think this is going to be a golden opportunity for people from different segments to be mainstreamed. And I would argue, while the Prime Minister, when he addressed the nation a few weeks back and spoke about some 20 lakh crores to be spent to rev up the economy, he also focused on 4 key areas where his government is going to spend a lot of time to enable things structurally: land, labor, law, and liquidity, right? So if tomorrow land regulations are going to be eased, you're going to probably have good class A commercial real estate in many of the tier 2 locations, which is today a bit of a challenge for companies wanting to go and establish their presence there. 2, labor. If labor regulations are relaxed, fine, you just need labor laws to be employment friendly, not necessarily employee friendly or employer friendly. They just need to be employment friendly. So today in the gig economy, people talk about people working part-time, people moonlighting, people taking dual employment. If some of these things are going to become a reality, you're going to have more women in the workforce. It is not just the physical location, but also all the other paraphernalia that actually makes employment attractive at the end of the day.
Yeah, they all fall into place. We'll take 3 more questions, sir. Subha Bangera has this question: will India become a big player in the biomedical business from what it is today, as prevention is the talk of the day, as most prevention medicines are derived from Ayurveda?
I think India has a great opportunity. And I would argue that technology will play a very, very important role in this. Fine. Every time I go to campuses to recruit students, I always tell the vice chancellor or the registrar, guys, there's so many biotech students in your campus. These are bioinformatics, biotechnology, biomedical genetics. There are various flavors of biosciences that students specialize in. And if you go back and look at any educational institution in the country, you'd realize that the IT companies have traditionally gone and absorbed all these biotechnologies, and not necessarily biotech or pharma or healthcare companies. I think it is a great opportunity given all the stuff that is happening. You look at what Tata Consultancy Services has done, joining hands with ICMR to try and then find a vaccine. You look at that WhatsApp forward where a lady who was fully pregnant developed a ventilator in Pune and then moved into the labor ward.
Yes.
Fine, I think we have wonderful examples, but what we need to do is to ensure that all forms of medicine are actually brought to the fore. In fact, I was very surprised when the governor of Tamil Nadu nominated me to join the Senate of MGR Medical University. I was scratching my head as to why is it that I was nominated. Then his principal secretary told me, hey, you guys have the largest exposure to the healthcare industry relative to any other technology company in the world. And that's probably one of the reasons why you got chosen for that role. But during the first meeting, it was such an eye-opener to me. All of us know that Anna University has about 500 plus affiliated colleges. Can you guess how many affiliated institutions are there to Dr. MGR Medical University? 800 plus.
Okay.
And the beauty is, this is just not general medicine. This is Unani, nursing, paramedical, sports medicine, naturopathy, so on and so forth. So the richness that India has, I think we really need to bring to bear. The only concern is that to call allopathy is the mainstream form of medicine and to call everything else as alternative streams of medicine.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
I think we need to get rid of the word alternative at some stage.
Absolutely. Mr. Ganapati referred to the chat we had sometime earlier in the day. And one of the points that Mr. Ganapati spoke about was about India's relevance in a post-COVID world, specifically referring to IT. And he was referring, and with a touch of concern, about the back-end facilities, the competition in terms of back-end facilities that will come from countries like Bangladesh, Philippines, even Kuala Lumpur developing as a destination, even countries like Croatia. So is that going to provide a lot of competition to India as a global presence, as a global player?
I think as a nation, we should welcome competition. Any form of competition only improves your credentials, your quality, your level of productivity. In fact, in the chambers of commerce that some of us are quite active in, we always get to discuss what has happened to the textile industry in Tirupur with newer competition from Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka, and some of the other places. I think competition keeps us on our heels. And at an individual level, at a company level, at an industry level, at a nation level, we all need to be paranoid. Fine about where the next competitive force is going to come from. But having said that, I just want to go back to the previous point that the kind of skill sets that India has at scale, I don't think there is any other country in the world that can hold a candle to India. We will clearly give any other nation a pair of heels. Just look at the engineering talent output from the state of Tamil Nadu or from any of the other larger states with similar engineering output. The state of Tamil Nadu produces more engineers, I believe, more than what the United States produces in a given year. So I think we do have the talent at scale. We just need to ensure that the talent is polished. We have the right skill sets infused in these brilliant students so that they are relevant in the marketplace and they can contribute to India and also contribute to the world.
Right. The last question, and a very interesting question from Mr. Ganapati. He's asked, Industry 4.0, the velocity of change is faster than the first three revolutions that we have seen. So how do you see life expectancy going up? Do you see people living beyond the age of 100 and simply refusing to die? Is reskilling / retraining the new norm to stay relevant?
I think technology clearly is going to be an enabler or a catalyst, but then you cannot abuse yourself and then expect technology to extend your lifetime, life expectancy. Now I know, I'm sure that many of you have read this book by Dan Buettner of the National Geographic Channel. He went around the world and then looked at many places in the world where people live beyond 100 years normally. There is a place in Italy, there is a place in Japan, so on and so forth. And that's where he talks about this concept of ikigai, right? Where people live a very healthy life. And once they are 50, 60 plus, the way they eat, the way they enjoy life with their friends, there's so many other factors that actually drive life expectancy. But coming back to Industry 4.0 and the velocity of change, I think this is probably the most important thing that we all need to keep at the back of our mind. If you go back and look at the last 30, 40 years, whenever there have been structural shifts in technology, whether it's a mainframe era, the mini era, the personal computing era, the internet or the e-commerce era, these are all driven by single technologies with long periods of stability. So all of us were able to adapt to it. As individuals, as companies, as government, as educational institutions, we could learn Unix and C for 15, 20 years and still be contented with it. But with Industry 4.0, it is no longer monolithic technologies that are creating this change. This is a confluence of technologies. Whether it's IoT, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, automation, to throw the entire kitchen sink into it and call it digital. Fine, but the beauty about the confluence of these technologies is there is perhaps not going to be any likely stability in the short term. And this is going to throw up humongous opportunities. So if today we are talking about the Indian IT to be 150, 180 billion dollars in terms of revenue, export, domestic, whichever way you want to slice and dice it. One could argue that every slice of this digital technology, IoT can be tens of billions of dollars with 5G becoming a reality. Data analytics can be tens of billions of dollars. Automation can be tens of billions of dollars. So therein lies the opportunity. While the velocity of change is something that we need to manage, the sheer magnitude of opportunity, I think, is something that we all need to value in. I would say that I'm more optimistic than ever, having been in this industry for the last 25 years, that what digital and industry 4.0 can potentially do to India as a nation, it will be a shame if we don't capitalize on it.
Absolutely. Even though we are 15 minutes over time beyond our scheduled time of closing, we still have many questions which we are unable to take. But Mr. Ramkumar, it was an education listening to you. I enjoyed myself thoroughly. For you to speak with such energy, enthusiasm, and so much of clarity, thank you very much. My apologies to all those listeners whose questions we could not accommodate in this session. Thank you very much for joining us. May I now request Mr. Kumar Pal Chopra to propose the vote of thanks.
Before Kumar comes, Ram, thanks a lot. Is it okay if we collect those questions and funnel it to you? So that if they are, and if you would like to turn around a response, we'll share it with them. Okay?
I'll be more than happy to.
Thanks. Aishwarya, take care of that. Thank you. Thanks, Ram. Unmute. KP, unmute.
Well, indeed, it was a wonderful session, and it is my great privilege and honor to propose this vote of thanks. IT has been the major growth engine of our economy for several decades, and with this becoming more important in post-COVID era, to hear in this context, it was our privilege to have Mr. Ramkumar Ramamurthy, Chairman Managing Director of Cognizant India. Thank you so much, sir, for taking time out of your busy schedule and addressing us with your in-depth analysis of a way forward of IT in post-COVID-19 era. Thank you so much, Mr. T.S. Sudhir, who once again wonderfully anchored today's topic with the speaker to get the best out of him for all of us. Thank you so much once again. Thank you so much, Mr. Ravi Sena Reddy of Sri City for sponsoring this entire series 2 of webinar for us. I would also like to thank our own president, Mr. R. Ganapathy of Southern India Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the entire secretariat of SICKI, especially Dr. Raghavan and Aishwarya, for putting this entire series of webinar together. And last but not the least, thank you all the participants for flowing in with your valuable questions, making this as an absolutely interesting and interactive session for all of us. Please do join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. on the topic of future of movies and entertainment with Mr. Shibashish Sarkar, the CEO of Reliance Entertainment, in the series 2, fourth webinar in the series 2 for us. Thank you all.
He will be KP. He'll be joined by Mr. Mr. Mani Ratnam. Okay, he's also going to be in conversation with all of us. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ram.
Good day.
Thanks, Mohan.
Thank you, Ram.
Getting this going.
Thank you.
Stay safe, all of you. Stay safe, all of you. Thank you. Bye.